Imagine walking through the grand halls of a palace, the echo of footsteps on stone floors, the flicker of candlelight on tapestries depicting kings, queens, and battles long past. The Tudors, their lives filled with intrigue, ambition, and scandal, continue to captivate our imagination centuries later. But what if we told you that the stories of Henry, Elizabeth, and Anne are only the surface? That beyond the crown, beyond the drama we see in history books and on television screens, there were countless other figures shaping the fate of England, working in the shadows, influencing decisions, and leaving marks that history has almost forgotten? From courtiers whose whispers could sway policy, to scholars whose ideas guided explorers across uncharted seas, these unsung players wielded influence quietly but powerfully. They were strategists, advisors, and visionaries who didn't seek the spotlight yet were instrumental in shaping the era. Their actions rippled through the courts and councils, through trade and diplomacy, through science and superstition, often leaving legacies that persisted long after their names faded from common knowledge. Take the clever minds who advised the monarchs, balancing loyalty with survival, or the women whose choices navigated the dangerous currents of court politics, sometimes at tremendous personal cost. Consider the scholars and alchemists whose knowledge and experimentation informed decisions of state and the expansion of England's power beyond its shores. Each of these figures played a role in creating the Tudor world, a world of ambition, danger, and opportunity. But too often, their contributions are overlooked in favor of the drama of royal scandal. Today, we want to turn the spotlight onto them. We want to uncover the stories that textbooks skim over and explore the subtle yet profound ways these individuals shaped the era. By understanding their lives and actions, we gain a deeper appreciation not only for the Tudors themselves, but also for the intricate web of people and events that made this period one of the most fascinating in history. Their stories challenge our understanding of power, influence, and survival, and they reveal that history is rarely about one person alone. It is about networks, choices, and the quiet brilliance that changes the course of events. So, if you think you know the Tudors, think again. Beneath the crowns and coronations lies a hidden world of intrigue, intellect, and impact that deserves to be explored. This is the story of those who were not always remembered, yet whose lives helped shape the destiny of a nation. Their legacies, though often hidden, are still with us, waiting to be rediscovered. Welcome to our channel. Over time, we've explored countless moments from history, uncovering stories that surprise, challenge, and inspire. In this video, we dive deep into the hidden figures of the Tudor era, the courtiers, scholars, and visionaries whose influence was immense but often overlooked. Join us as we unravel the lives of these unsung heroes and reveal how their actions shaped the world we know today. The Tudor period in England continues to fascinate people today, yet much of the attention is focused on a small group of well-known figures. Names like Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, and Anne Boleyn dominate public imagination. Movies, television series, novels, and even casual conversation often circle back to these personalities. This focus raises an interesting question. Why do we remain so obsessed with a select few, while countless other individuals who shaped the period remain largely invisible? Understanding this requires examining both the nature of historical storytelling and the factors that influence which stories are preserved and celebrated. Henry VIII, with his 6 marriages, break from the Catholic Church, and reputation for ruthlessness, presents a compelling figure for narrative. Elizabeth I's rise to power as a female monarch in a male-dominated world and her success in navigating political, religious, and military challenges captures the imagination. And Boleyn, as a figure of ambition, scandal, and tragedy, offers stories of romance and political intrigue that are easy to dramatize. These individuals are convenient focal points for storytelling because their lives contain clear conflicts, personal stakes, and outcomes that fit neatly into narrative structures. Their stories are dramatic, emotionally resonant, and easy to condense into films, biographies, and textbooks. However, focusing on these figures alone creates a distorted view of the Tudor era. The period was complex and full of people whose decisions, labor, and creativity had profound effects, but who are rarely acknowledged. Courtiers, bureaucrats, merchants, scholars, religious reformers, and even ordinary citizens contributed to the political, economic, and cultural shifts of the time. The development of England's administrative systems, the growth of commerce and trade, the expansion of literacy and education, and the flourishing of arts and architecture were all influenced by a network of individuals whose names rarely appear in popular accounts. For example, Thomas Cromwell, often overshadowed by Henry VIII in popular media, was crucial in shaping government policies, streamlining administration, and facilitating religious reform. His work laid the foundation for a more centralized state, yet his name is less recognized than that of his king. The historical blind spot created by popular narratives is also shaped by the sources that historians rely upon. Royal correspondence, official records, and contemporary chronicles often focus on the elite, particularly monarchs and their immediate circles. Documents relating to merchants, artisans, or local administrators are less frequently preserved or are scattered, making it more challenging for historians to reconstruct their stories. When historical narratives are later distilled for broader audiences, the emphasis tends to remain on those whose lives are already documented and sensational. In this way, the survival of evidence interacts with cultural fascination to reinforce the prominence of certain figures. Another factor is the role of symbolism and identity in memory. Henry VIII represents both the excesses of monarchy and the defining religious transformation of England. Elizabeth I embodies the ideal of a strong, successful ruler who overcame the limitations imposed by gender in her era. Their stories are convenient for exploring themes of power, ambition, love, and betrayal, which resonate across centuries. These symbolic roles make it easier for writers, filmmakers, and educators to craft compelling narratives. By contrast, individuals who contributed quietly behind the scenes rarely fit these archetypes. Their achievements may be essential historically, but they are less dramatic and harder to translate into easily digestible narratives. The omission of crucial players also reflects broader patterns in historical writing. Traditional historiography often privileges political and military events over social, economic, and cultural dynamics. This creates a focus on rulers and battles at the expense of the networks and systems that sustain society. For instance, while the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII is widely studied, the lives of the monks and nuns displaced by this policy, or the local communities affected by the redistribution of church lands, receive far less attention. These experiences were critical to understanding the period fully, but remain largely invisible in popular accounts. Similarly, women outside the royal family, such as the writers, patrons, and businesswomen who influenced culture and economy, are often ignored. Their exclusion from mainstream narratives is a combination of the historical record's biases and later choices about what stories were worth telling. Economic and social changes during the Tudor era also depended on individuals who never made it into the spotlight. Merchants expanded trade networks, introduced new goods, and supported industries that transformed urban life. Craftsmen, builders, and architects contributed to a built environment that still shapes English towns and cities. Educators and scholars facilitated the spread of ideas, including religious reform and humanist thought, which influenced both elite and popular culture. These contributions were fundamental to the transformation of England into a more centralized, literate, and economically vibrant society, yet they rarely feature in the cultural imagination dominated by monarchs. The interplay of power and visibility is another reason certain figures are remembered while others are forgotten. Monarchs and their immediate circle had the means to commission portraits, publish writings, and ensure that official records celebrated their achievements. Those without access to these tools often left fewer traces for historians to work with. Moreover, the dramatic and violent nature of court life ensured that stories of intrigue, scandal, and execution were recorded and retold, further cementing the fame of a few. Meanwhile, the quiet but essential work of administrators, financiers, teachers, and artists did not generate sensational anecdotes, making it less likely to survive in popular memory. Despite this, modern scholarship has increasingly sought to uncover the hidden stories of the Tudor era. Historians now study social, economic, and cultural history to illuminate the lives of those beyond the royal court. Archival research, including wills, account books, letters, and municipal records, has revealed individuals whose decisions and actions shaped society in ways that were previously unrecognized. Figures such as John Cabot, whose voyages expanded England's knowledge of the wider world, or Jane Dormer, who influenced politics at a European level, demonstrate the diversity of impact that extended beyond the palace walls. These discoveries complicate the simplistic narrative of the Tudors as defined solely by kings and queens. Popular culture, however, has been slower to adjust. Films, television series, and novels continue to highlight the most sensational lives, favoring stories with romance, betrayal, and high-stakes political maneuvering. This means that public understanding of the period often lags behind academic research. It also underscores a broader issue in historical consciousness. The stories that endure are not necessarily those that are most accurate or representative, but those that are easiest to dramatize. The focus on a select few can also obscure the structural and systemic factors that shaped events. Henry VIII's religious policies, for instance, were not simply the result of personal whims, but reflected complex political pressures, financial considerations, and administrative innovations. By emphasizing the monarch as the primary agent, narratives risk minimizing the role of advisors, bureaucrats, and local officials who translated policies into action. Similarly, the achievements of Elizabeth I were supported by a network of diplomats, military commanders, and local magistrates whose strategic contributions were essential to maintaining stability and security. Recognizing these individuals allows for a more nuanced understanding of governance and social change during the period. The historical blind spot is also linked to class and gender. Many women, particularly those outside the nobility, played vital roles in household management, education, and commerce, yet their contributions are rarely chronicled. The labor of servants, artisans, and agricultural workers underpin the economy and daily life, but remains largely invisible. By examining these groups, historians can reconstruct the lived experiences of ordinary people, providing a fuller picture of the Tudor world. Such work challenges the conventional focus on courtly intrigue and elite accomplishments and highlights the complex interplay between social structures and individual agency. Religion, a central theme of the Tudor period, also illustrates the importance of overlooked figures. Reformers, theologians, and local clergy influenced the spread and reception of new religious ideas. Their writings, sermons, and organizational skills shaped communities and determined how policies were implemented at a local level. The dissolution of monasteries, the establishment of new churches, and the translation of the Bible into English were transformative events that relied on countless individuals whose names have largely disappeared from public memory. Without acknowledging these contributors, the understanding of religious change remains incomplete and overly focused on monarchs and high-profile advisors. The arts and literature offer another example. While figures such as Shakespeare are widely celebrated, countless artists, musicians, and writers contributed to the period's cultural richness without achieving lasting fame. Patrons who supported creative work, printers who disseminated texts, and performers who brought literature to life all shaped the cultural landscape. These individuals were essential to the proliferation of ideas, aesthetics, and innovation, yet their absence from conventional narratives contributes to the illusion that history is driven solely by famous leaders. Historians also highlight the role of chance and circumstance in shaping memory. Accidents of survival, whether a letter, diary, or account book, determine who is remembered. Many who were influential in their lifetimes left no enduring trace, while others are famous because their records survived. This randomness affects both academic and popular histories. Understanding this helps explain why public fascination often centers on a few high-profile figures, while the contributions of many remain invisible. Reevaluating the Tudor period requires acknowledging the interconnectedness of power, influence, and memory. Monarchs were important, but they were part of a broader ecosystem of individuals whose actions shaped the political, economic, social, and cultural landscape. Focusing exclusively on Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, and their contemporaries risks oversimplifying a rich and complex period. By bringing unsung figures to light, historians and writers can offer a more balanced, accurate, and compelling understanding of the era. The obsession with select figures also reflects broader cultural patterns in how people relate to history. Dramatic personalities are easier to identify with and more entertaining to study. They provide clear narratives of heroism, villainy, triumph, and tragedy. Ordinary people, bureaucrats, and background figures, while historically significant, offer subtler lessons and require more effort to interpret. This selective attention has persisted for centuries, reinforced by educational systems, media, and popular literature. Challenging this obsession involves both academic and public engagement. Scholars have increasingly embraced microhistory, biography, and social history to recover the voices of overlooked individuals. Digital archives, public history projects, and local history initiatives allow broader audiences to encounter these stories. By examining the networks of influence, the processes of governance, and the daily lives of ordinary people, these approaches illuminate the complexity of the Tudor world and the contributions of those outside the traditional spotlight. The importance of recognizing these unsung figures extends beyond historical accuracy. It also reshapes our understanding of leadership, power, and societal change. The achievements of famous monarchs were made possible by the labor, intelligence, and courage of countless others. By highlighting these contributions, history becomes less about individual heroism and more about the collective human effort that drives change. This perspective encourages a more nuanced appreciation of past events and underscores the value of diverse experiences and roles in shaping society. The ongoing fascination with the Tudors is a product of dramatic personalities, symbolic resonance, and historical storytelling that favors the sensational and well-documented. Yet, this focus obscures the broader network of individuals who contributed to the political, cultural, and social transformations of the period. Administrators, reformers, merchants, scholars, artisans, women, and ordinary citizens all played vital roles that deserve recognition. By examining these overlooked figures, historians provide a more comprehensive and accurate picture of the Tudor era, one that acknowledges the complexity of historical change and the interconnectedness of all participants. Moving beyond the monarchs allows us to appreciate the richness of the period and to understand history not merely as the story of a few famous individuals, but as a tapestry woven from countless lives, each contributing in their own way to the unfolding of events. It challenges us to reconsider who we remember, why we remember them, and how the stories we choose to tell shape our understanding of the past. This approach also encourages critical thinking about sources, evidence, and narrative construction. It highlights the importance of looking beyond the obvious and questioning the received wisdom about who matters in history. By doing so, we not only recover the contributions of those previously overlooked, but also develop a richer, more empathetic, and more accurate understanding of the past. The Tudor era thus emerges as a complex, interconnected, and dynamic period, shaped by a multitude of actors whose efforts collectively influenced the course of history. Recognizing these unsung heroes challenges simplistic narratives and invites deeper engagement with the rich tapestry of human experience. Building on the idea of moving beyond the well-known monarchs and embracing the full complexity of the Tudor era, our purpose becomes clear: to unearth the forgotten few who truly shaped the period. These were individuals whose influence, though often unrecognized, was essential to the political, social, economic, and cultural transformations of their time. Recognizing them requires a conscious effort to look beyond the sensational lives of kings and queens and to consider the networks, institutions, and ordinary people whose contributions were foundational. By doing so, we begin to see the Tudor era not as the story of a handful of figures, but as a dynamic web of human activity, collaboration, and conflict. One of the most important groups to consider are the administrative minds behind the monarchy. Figures like Thomas Cromwell, though somewhat known, are still underappreciated in popular culture relative to their impact. Cromwell did more than advise Henry VIII. He reorganized the government, streamlined bureaucratic systems, and played a pivotal role in implementing policies that transformed England's legal and religious landscape. Without such individuals, the monarch's grand designs would have remained abstract ambitions. Similarly, William Cecil, later Lord Burleigh, provided Elizabeth I with the intelligence, diplomatic acumen, and domestic stability that allowed her to maintain power effectively. These advisors and bureaucrats exemplify the crucial but often invisible work required to turn political vision into reality. Religious reformers, local clergy, and scholars were another group whose contributions cannot be overstated. While kings dictated religious policy, the practical work of translating scripture, educating parishioners, and administering new institutions fell to people who rarely appear in the spotlight. The spread of Protestantism, the organization of parish churches, and the education of the next generation of English citizens depended on teachers, ministers, and administrators who implemented reforms on the ground. The dissolution of monasteries, for instance, was not only a royal decree, but a vast logistical undertaking requiring negotiation, assessment, and management by administrators and local officials. Without these individuals, the profound changes in England's religious landscape would have been far slower and less coherent. Economic and social change also depended heavily on people outside the royal court. Merchants and traders expanded England's reach across Europe and beyond, introducing new goods, stimulating urban growth, and creating networks that underpinned long-term economic transformation. Craftsmen, builders, and artisans shaped the physical environment, leaving a tangible legacy in towns, churches, and public buildings. Even ordinary laborers, farmers, and domestic workers played a role, sustaining the economy and contributing to the complex social fabric of Tudor life. Their labor created the conditions for cultural and political developments to take root. By focusing exclusively on monarchs, history neglects the countless small, deliberate acts that cumulatively shaped society. Women beyond the royal family represent another crucial but overlooked group. While Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth I dominate attention, other women, patrons of the arts, business operators, educators, and household managers, exerted substantial influence in their communities. Women organized networks of support, managed finances, and facilitated the education and cultural development of their families and wider communities. Their labor and creativity were central to sustaining households, commerce, and culture, yet they are frequently absent from conventional histories. Recovering their stories illuminates the ways in which gender, agency, and influence operated beyond the court, and challenges the notion that historical significance was the sole domain of men in power. Exploration and intellectual advancement also owed much to individuals whose names are often forgotten. Figures such as John Cabot, who ventured into uncharted territories, expanded England's understanding of the wider world, laying the groundwork for future exploration and trade. Scholars, writers, and educators cultivated knowledge that informed political decisions, religious debates, and cultural achievements. The proliferation of printed texts, the spread of literacy, and the patronage of artists and thinkers created an environment in which ideas could flourish. Each of these contributions, while not as immediately dramatic as royal intrigue, fundamentally shaped the intellectual and material landscape of Tudor England. Artisans, performers, and cultural facilitators played a similarly essential role. The production of plays, music, literature, and visual art required the coordinated efforts of individuals across social strata. Authors, musicians, painters, actors, printers, and patrons. Their work defined the cultural character of the period, influenced public sentiment, and contributed to the enduring legacy of the era's artistic achievements. While Elizabethan theater or the works of Shakespeare capture attention, the broader network of creators who supported, performed, and disseminated cultural work is often ignored. Recognizing these figures underscores the collaborative nature of cultural production and the multiplicity of contributors who shaped public life. Another aspect of this purposeful investigation is attention to local governance and community leadership. Magistrates, sheriffs, and town officials enforced laws, collected taxes, and managed public resources, ensuring that national policies could function effectively on the ground. Their decisions often affected daily life more immediately than royal proclamations. Similarly, local networks of merchants, guilds, and civic institutions influenced social norms, economic opportunities, and urban development. By examining these individuals and institutions, we can appreciate how power and agency were exercised at multiple levels, not solely at the top. The process of unearthing these forgotten figures also involves a critical examination of sources. Historians rely on letters, account books, wills, legal records, and municipal documents to reconstruct lives that were otherwise invisible. These materials reveal the complexity of decision-making, the interplay of personal ambition and public duty, and the often overlooked human stories behind policy and cultural production. By focusing on these records, historians can challenge simplified narratives and highlight the diversity of experiences and contributions that shaped the Tudor era. Moreover, unearthing the forgotten few reshapes our understanding of historical causality. Events such as the English Reformation, the expansion of trade, or the consolidation of central government were not the product of single individuals acting in isolation. They were the result of networks, negotiations, and sustained effort by a multitude of actors. Recognizing this complexity deepens our appreciation for the era and encourages a more nuanced approach to history, one that values process, collaboration, and context over simple heroism or scandal. Our purpose also involves correcting cultural memory. Popular narratives have long focused on dramatic figures because they are easier to tell and more compelling for entertainment purposes. By contrast, stories of administrators, reformers, artisans, women, and ordinary citizens are subtler, less sensational, and more dispersed across sources. Bringing these individuals into the public imagination helps balance our understanding of history, offering a fuller, more accurate representation of the period. It also challenges assumptions about who matters in history and encourages reflection on the criteria by which society measures significance. In uncovering these forgotten figures, we also gain insight into the mechanisms of power and influence. Monarchs and nobility relied on networks of expertise and labor to achieve their goals. Diplomacy, governance, trade, cultural production, and religious reform all depended on contributions from people operating behind the scenes. Recognizing these contributors does not diminish the importance of well-known figures, but rather contextualizes their achievements, showing how leadership and innovation emerge from collaborative systems. Ultimately, the task of unearthing the forgotten few enriches our understanding of the Tudor era. It reveals a society shaped by a multitude of actors, each influencing outcomes in ways that are not immediately visible but are profoundly consequential. This approach emphasizes the interdependence of individuals, institutions, and communities in driving historical change. It also broadens the scope of historical inquiry, inviting us to explore stories that have been overlooked, to question conventional narratives, and to appreciate the depth and diversity of human effort that underpins history. By focusing on these forgotten figures, we honor the complexity of the period and acknowledge the true breadth of human contribution. The Tudor age was not simply defined by a handful of iconic monarchs, but by countless individuals whose vision, labor, and creativity shaped the political, cultural, and social landscape of England. Unearthing these stories transforms our understanding of the past, moving from a narrow, monarch-centered narrative to a richer, more inclusive view of history, one that recognizes the profound impact of those previously overlooked. This work ultimately challenges both historians and the public to think critically about significance, visibility, and legacy. It reminds us that history is not solely the record of the famous, but a tapestry woven from innumerable lives, each contributing to the unfolding of events in meaningful ways. By focusing on the forgotten few, we honor their influence, illuminate the structures that sustain change, and deepen our understanding of the era in all its complexity, demonstrating that true historical insight lies not in celebrity alone, but in recognizing the full spectrum of human endeavor. Building upon the exploration of the forgotten figures who shaped the Tudor era, Thomas Cromwell stands as a singular example of how influence extends far beyond the glare of royal attention. While Henry VIII dominates popular imagination with his marriages, political decisions, and dramatic personal life, Cromwell's role in shaping the machinery of governance and the long-term trajectory of England is often understated. He was more than a courtier or political schemer. He was an architect of institutional reform whose work transformed the legal, financial, and administrative landscape of Tudor England. Understanding his contributions provides a lens through which to appreciate the era's complexity and the ways in which power operated through systems rather than spectacle. Thomas Cromwell's rise to power illustrates both his personal skill and the possibilities for social mobility in Tudor England. Born into a modest family, he spent his early years traveling, engaging in commerce, and absorbing continental ideas. Unlike the aristocracy, which often relied on inherited status, Cromwell advanced through talent, intelligence, and an acute understanding of networks and influence. His ability to navigate patronage, anticipate opportunities, and implement complex administrative strategies demonstrates how expertise and adaptability could shape a career as dramatically as birthright. Cromwell's trajectory emphasizes the importance of bureaucratic skill in shaping national policy and shows that power in Tudor England could be achieved through intellect and practical ability, not just inherited privilege. One of Cromwell's most significant achievements was the transformation of England's governance. He recognized that effective rule required more than the authority of the monarch. It required structures capable of carrying out policy consistently across the kingdom. By reorganizing the administration, he created offices, procedures, and systems that improved efficiency, accountability, and coordination. These reforms professionalized aspects of governance that had previously been informal or inconsistent. Innovations in record-keeping, legal administration, and bureaucratic management allowed royal decisions to be enforced in practical, measurable ways, ensuring that policy had tangible effects throughout the realm. Cromwell's expertise extended to finance. He understood that the strength of the state depended on fiscal stability. Through careful evaluation of revenue, taxation, and land management, he implemented systems that reduced corruption and improved efficiency. The dissolution of the monasteries, while often framed as a religious or moral initiative, also served as a major economic reform. Cromwell oversaw the redistribution and sale of church lands, generating revenue for the crown and reshaping England's economic landscape. These measures required not only administrative skill, but also careful attention to social and political consequences, as they provoked resistance and demanded negotiation to maintain stability. Cromwell's approach to policy combined pragmatism with innovation. He did not merely implement the king's wishes. He built frameworks designed to endure beyond any individual's authority. His reforms of the legal system, for example, made justice more predictable and accessible, strengthening the state while promoting social order. By instituting systematic approaches to governance, Cromwell enhanced institutional resilience and continuity, demonstrating that lasting impact depends as much on the design of structures as on the ambitions of rulers. Religion was another arena in which Cromwell's organizational talents were crucial. The break with Rome and the creation of the Church of England are often associated with Henry VIII's personal ambitions, but the implementation of these changes relied heavily on Cromwell. He coordinated complex bureaucratic processes, drafted legislation, and ensured that new religious institutions could operate effectively. By translating ideological change into practical administration, he allowed England to adapt to profound shifts without collapsing into disorder. His work made possible a transformation that was as much operational as it was theological. Cromwell's influence also extended to culture and ideas. He was a patron of learning and was familiar with continental legal, commercial, and administrative practices. By introducing these approaches to England, he helped modernize governance and connected the country to broader European developments. This demonstrates that his impact was not confined to political structures. He played a role in shaping the intellectual and practical context of the Tudor state. Despite his achievements, Cromwell's career underscores the fragility of power. His position relied on the favor of Henry VIII, whose unpredictable temperament could elevate or destroy those around him. Cromwell's ultimate downfall illustrates that even exceptional skill could not fully insulate an individual from the volatility of court politics. His experience highlights the tension between systemic competence and personal power, showing that influence depends as much on circumstance as on ability. Examining Cromwell's career allows us to appreciate the broader mechanisms of Tudor governance. Many of the period's major achievements, centralized administration, religious reform, financial management, and legal modernization, were shaped not solely by the monarch, but by skilled individuals like Cromwell. His work demonstrates that effective government is a product of technical knowledge, strategic planning, and meticulous execution. These contributions were often less visible than dramatic events, but had enduring consequences for the English state. Cromwell's reforms also laid the foundation for future governance. The systems he established influenced Elizabethan administration and subsequent developments in central government. By emphasizing documentation, accountability, and structured procedures, he created practices that could outlast any single ruler. His example shows that historical impact is not always immediate or dramatic. It can reside in carefully designed institutions that endure over decades. Cromwell's legacy challenges conventional narratives that privilege spectacle over substance. Popular history often emphasizes court intrigue, scandal, or conflict, but his true genius lay in organization, foresight, and consistent application of policy. These qualities, while less visible, shaped the Tudor state in profound ways. His career illustrates that significant influence is often exercised quietly, through expertise, planning, and the capacity to implement complex reforms. By aligning administrative, fiscal, legal, and religious systems, Cromwell demonstrated an integrated vision of governance. He understood that political stability, economic efficiency, legal order, and religious cohesion were interdependent. This holistic approach allowed him to manage a state in transition and created a model for effective governance that extended beyond the immediate reign of Henry VIII. Cromwell's story exemplifies the power of skilled administrators to shape history. He combined intellect, practical ability, and foresight to transform England's government and society, even without traditional noble status. His work reminds us that history is shaped not only by monarchs or dramatic events, but also by individuals who organize, implement, and sustain systems. Recognition of figures like Cromwell enriches our understanding of historical change and demonstrates the importance of strategic thinking, technical competence, and sustained effort. In reflecting on Cromwell, we see the interplay between personal ambition and public service. He pursued his own advancement while simultaneously building institutions that served the broader state. This duality highlights how individual agency interacts with structural power and illustrates that effective leadership often requires balancing self-interest with systemic goals. Cromwell's example shows that enduring influence is created by those who can combine strategic foresight with practical execution. Ultimately, Thomas Cromwell's life demonstrates that historical significance is not measured only by fame, dramatic events, or visible authority. True impact often resides in careful planning, innovation, and the ability to make ideas work in practice. By examining his contributions, we gain a clearer picture of Tudor England as a complex, evolving state shaped by skillful, often unheralded individuals. Cromwell's work exemplifies how thoughtful administration, strategic vision, and resilience can leave lasting marks on society, even when the individual's name is overshadowed by more prominent figures. Mary Bullen, the elder sister of Anne Boleyn, occupies a unique position in the history of Tudor England. While her sister's life and dramatic downfall are widely chronicled, Mary's story has often been treated as a footnote, overshadowed by Anne's notorious rise to queenship and eventual execution. Yet, a closer examination of Mary Bullen's life reveals a figure whose experiences provide critical insight into the mechanisms of power, the role of women at court, and the personal costs associated with proximity to authority during the 16th century. Her story is not merely ancillary. It illuminates the delicate balance between ambition, influence, and survival in an era when favor could elevate or destroy a family. Mary's early years are largely obscured by the passage of time, with limited records leaving many details open to interpretation. She was born into a family determined to secure influence, wealth, and social standing in a competitive courtly environment. The Boleyn family's ambitions were far from unique. Families of similar rank often sought to consolidate their positions through marriages, strategic alliances, and carefully placed roles within the royal household. Mary's upbringing would have reflected these imperatives, her education, comportment, and social training geared toward preparing her for service at court. Such preparation was essential for women of her status, whose futures were often contingent on their ability to navigate intricate social hierarchies, cultivate advantageous relationships, and maintain reputations that could withstand scrutiny. Mary Boleyn's entry into the royal household as a lady-in-waiting was a pivotal moment, placing her directly at the center of court life. This role brought with it both prestige and vulnerability. In Tudor England, women serving in the household of the queen or royal family had access to powerful networks, opportunities to observe and participate in the subtleties of political maneuvering, and the chance to influence events, albeit indirectly. At the same time, such positions required constant vigilance and conformity to expectations that were often rigid and unforgiving. Courtly proximity to the monarch presented potential for rapid advancement, but also exposed women to risks, including gossip, scandal, and the shifting whims of royal favor. For Mary, these dynamics would shape much of her adult life, forcing her to reconcile personal ambition with familial duty and societal constraint. One of the most discussed aspects of Mary Boleyn's life is her relationship with Henry VIII. Contemporary sources suggest that she became the king's mistress before Anne Boleyn's rise to prominence, though the specifics of the relationship remain uncertain. Historical accounts have often emphasized scandal and moral judgment, but a broader perspective situates the liaison within the context of Tudor court politics. Relationships with powerful men were rarely purely private matters. They could affect family fortunes, political alliances, and even the prospects of other relatives. For the Boleyns, Mary's connection to Henry may have provided leverage and opportunity, potentially smoothing the path for Anne's eventual courtship and ascent to queenship. The personal costs of this arrangement, however, were considerable. Being associated with the king invited scrutiny, risk, and the potential to become a pawn in larger political machinations. Mary's experience exemplifies the precarious position of women at court, whose influence often depended on negotiation, discretion, and the careful management of reputation. Beyond her liaison with Henry, Mary's role as a courtier demonstrates her capacity for subtle influence. While less publicly prominent than and/or ministers such as Thomas Cromwell, Mary had access to information, networks, and observations that could inform strategic decisions. Her proximity to and during her queenship, for instance, offered a vantage point from which to witness the intricate workings of power, including the methods through which influence was brokered, alliances formed, and disputes resolved. Even if her actions were not explicitly recorded, the knowledge she gained and the relationships she cultivated allowed her to navigate the court with a degree of autonomy. Mary's experience underscores the notion that influence in Tudor England was not solely the product of formal office or overt authority, but could also operate through relational skill, observation, and subtle intervention. Comparing Mary and Anne highlights the diverse ways women could exert power in Tudor society. Anne's approach was more visible and assertive. She achieved queenship but ultimately paid the highest price for ambition in a court rife with intrigue. Mary's influence, by contrast, was quieter, often indirect, yet essential in shaping the environment in which her sister operated. This contrast illustrates a broader historical truth. The most dramatic narratives are not always the most representative. Tudor court life was a complex ecosystem in which visibility, power, and vulnerability were unevenly distributed. Women like Mary navigated these dynamics with careful calculation, exercising agency through strategy and subtle intervention rather than through public displays of authority. Mary Bullen's life also illustrates the personal costs associated with this delicate navigation. Familial ambitions demanded sacrifices that were both tangible and intangible, ranging from constrained personal freedom to the careful management of public perception. Women at court often faced a dual expectation: to pursue family interests while maintaining personal virtue as defined by contemporary standards. For Mary, this tension would have been constant. Decisions regarding relationships, behavior, and loyalty to her sister were not merely personal choices. They were strategies aimed at survival and influence. Her story reflects the hidden labor of women who operated within power structures, a labor that involved emotional resilience, ethical negotiation, and strategic foresight. Recognizing these efforts challenges the traditional focus on male actors in Tudor history, revealing that women's contributions, though less visible, were critical to the operation of courtly politics. Another dimension of Mary Bullen's life is the role of gender in historical memory. Anne's life was documented extensively because it intersected dramatically with the monarchy, producing consequences of national and political significance. Mary's quieter influence, exercised through observation and relational skill, was less likely to enter official records. Historiography has traditionally favored overt political action, conspicuous scandal, and structural reform, often marginalizing subtler forms of influence. As a result, Mary's contributions have been overshadowed, creating an incomplete understanding of Tudor court dynamics. Examining her life helps correct this imbalance by revealing the networks of observation, counsel, and negotiation that shaped the period in less visible but nonetheless profound ways. The dynamics between Mary and Anne further illuminate the interplay of loyalty and rivalry in Tudor familial life. Sisters could simultaneously support and compete with one another, navigating overlapping spheres of influence and opportunity. Mary's capacity to balance her personal interests with her sister's ambitions demonstrates both resilience and political acumen. The intertwining of their fates exemplifies the moral and strategic complexity inherent in familial relationships at court, where decisions were never purely personal but carried implications for survival, reputation, and advancement. This complexity challenges simplified narratives that portray women as passive participants in history, highlighting instead their ability to exercise judgment, shape outcomes, and influence events indirectly. Mary's long-term survival distinguishes her from, and underscores another form of achievement: the capacity to adapt to changing circumstances. While Anne's life ended in execution, Mary navigated a volatile political environment and lived beyond the apex of her family's influence. Survival required vigilance, flexibility, and social intelligence. Mary's later years, though less thoroughly documented, demonstrate that proximity to power could be leveraged not only for immediate advantage, but also for sustained influence through family strategy, social networking, and the careful management of reputation. Her story illustrates that historical significance is not always measured by dramatic events or public recognition, but also by endurance, adaptability, and the cultivation of subtle forms of influence. The personal sacrifices Mary made were inextricably tied to these broader political and familial strategies. Her relationships, conduct, and opportunities were mediated by the expectations and ambitions of those around her, compelling her to negotiate spaces of constraint and possibility. Each choice carried implications for reputation, family prospects, and survival. By analyzing these decisions, historians gain insight into the human dimensions behind historical events, the ethical dilemmas, emotional burdens, and complex reasoning that shaped behavior within the court. Mary's experiences remind us that historical actors were not merely conduits of power, but individuals managing pressures and risks, often with limited resources and options. Mary Bullen's life also invites a reassessment of how influence is defined. Traditional historical narratives equate power with office, title, or formal authority, yet Mary's example shows that indirect influence can be equally consequential. Through observation, counsel, and social presence, she contributed to shaping familial and political outcomes. She understood the nuances of negotiation, reputation, and relational strategy, employing skills that were essential to the operation of the court. Recognizing such contributions expands the historical lens, acknowledging that the mechanisms of power extend beyond formal structures into networks of human interaction and strategic adaptation. The psychological and emotional demands of court life are another critical aspect of Mary's experience. Her role required constant vigilance, awareness of shifting alliances, and careful self-presentation. Women at court lived under intense scrutiny, with the potential for scandal or displacement ever present. These pressures were magnified for someone like Mary, who had to navigate the dual expectations of family loyalty and personal survival. Considering these factors adds depth to our understanding of Tudor society, highlighting the interplay between public events and private experience and demonstrating that political life was as much an emotional endeavor as a strategic one. Mary's life complements and complicates the narratives of figures like Anne Boleyn or Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell's impact was structural, shaping policy and governance, while Anne's influence was dramatic and symbolic, directly affecting the monarchy. Mary's contributions, however, were relational, perceptive, and enduring in quieter ways. Her life exemplifies the multiple dimensions through which individuals could affect history, emphasizing that public recognition does not always equate to historical significance. Through her story, we gain a more nuanced perspective on Tudor power, understanding that influence often operated on hidden levels and that the stability of institutions relied on individuals whose work was less visible but no less important. Mary Bullen's story also provides a framework for examining the human cost of proximity to power. Her experience illustrates the balance between engagement and discretion, action and observation, and ambition and personal restraint. These dynamics illuminate the emotional, social, and ethical dimensions of life at court, highlighting the sacrifices, pressures, and judgments required of women who sought to navigate complex political environments. Mary's ability to survive and adapt reinforces the idea that historical impact is not solely measured by formal achievement or notoriety, but also by resilience, insight, and the capacity to act strategically within constrained circumstances. Her life invites broader reflection on the roles of women in Tudor society. Mary demonstrates that influence could be exercised quietly, survival could constitute achievement, and the costs of proximity to power were often deeply personal. Studying her experiences underscores that history is shaped not only by kings, ministers, and queens, but also by those whose contributions were relational, adaptive, and often invisible. By examining Mary Bullen's life, we recover a vital perspective on the Tudor court, enhancing our understanding of the era's complexity, humanizing its actors, and honoring the subtle yet significant ways in which individuals shape historical trajectories. Mary Bullen's journey, encompassing both opportunity and constraint, reflects the broader realities of women in Tudor England. Her story illustrates that influence can operate through relational skill and observation as effectively as through formal authority, that survival is itself an achievement, and that navigating a politically charged environment imposes personal and ethical costs. Her experiences broaden our understanding of Tudor history, providing insight into the lives of those whose contributions were less conspicuous but integral to the functioning of the court. By integrating her perspective into the broader historical narrative, we obtain a richer and more nuanced picture of the period, acknowledging the diversity of strategies, experiences, and forms of power available to women. Finally, Mary Bullen's life prompts reflection on the universality of her experience. The interplay of ambition, familial duty, societal expectation, and political pressure creates a landscape in which every decision carries significance. Her story demonstrates the intelligence, resilience, and judgment required to navigate such conditions successfully, reminding us that historical influence is multifaceted and often indirect. Recognizing Mary's contributions allows historians and readers alike to appreciate the diverse ways in which individuals shape their circumstances and, ultimately, the course of history. Her life exemplifies the intersection of personal agency and structural constraint, revealing that even figures who operate quietly, behind the scenes, leave a lasting imprint on their world. Mary Bullen's life provides an essential counterpoint to the dramatic narratives of more famous figures in Tudor England. Her story illuminates the complex relationship between proximity to power and personal agency, the subtleties of influence exercised through relational skill and observation, and the emotional and social costs of navigating courtly life. Her experiences demonstrate that survival, strategic acumen, and quiet negotiation are forms of achievement worthy of historical recognition. Through Mary Bullen, we gain a more complete understanding of Tudor society, appreciating both the visible and invisible mechanisms through which power operated. Her life enriches our comprehension of the period, offering insight into the human dimensions of political life, the nuanced contributions of women, and the ways in which historical actors, even when overlooked, shaped the course of events. John Dee illustrates another dimension of Tudor power, one grounded less in domestic influence and more in intellectual, political, and mystical authority. His life shows how expertise and reputation could serve as forms of agency in a society defined by hierarchy, political risk, and the constant demand for innovation. While Mary Bullen navigated courtly favor and personal alliances, Dee maneuvered through the equally complex realms of scholarship, state service, and esoteric practice, demonstrating that knowledge itself could be both a tool and a liability. Born in London, Dee showed early aptitude in mathematics, astronomy, alchemy, and mystical philosophy. Unlike women at court, whose influence relied on visibility and relationships, Dee's impact came through texts, instruments, and a network of European correspondence. His work was not purely academic. It served national ambition, political intelligence, and religious legitimacy. Dee reflects the Tudor fascination with knowledge applied to practical ends, understanding the natural world, and using that understanding to advance exploration, governance, and personal standing. Dee's reputation as a mathematician, astrologer, and alchemist drew the attention of Elizabeth I, who valued both his technical skill and his insight into hidden patterns of the world. His authority rested not on birth or title, but on mastery of specialized knowledge. In navigation, he provided maps, instruments, and calculations that supported England's maritime expansion, linking abstract learning to tangible political and economic outcomes. His mystical pursuits were central to his identity and appeal. Dee practiced angelic communication, divination, and alchemy, straddling the boundary between emerging scientific methods and mystical speculation. In an age that saw the natural and supernatural as interconnected, Dee's skills gave Elizabethan authorities both practical intelligence and symbolic legitimacy. Astrology, cryptography, and esoteric insight allowed him to operate in a space where knowledge reinforced political authority. Dee also contributed as a diplomat and intelligence agent, undertaking missions across Europe to gather information and negotiate on behalf of the crown. His multilingual skills, scholarly credentials, and courtly experience gave him access to networks unavailable to many contemporaries. These missions combined practical espionage with a subtle extension of English influence abroad, demonstrating how knowledge and mobility functioned as instruments of political leverage. At the same time, Dee's work carried risks. Engagement with the occult could provoke suspicion or social exclusion, and his prominence depended on court favor. Like Mary Bullen, Dee had to navigate volatility, balancing ambition, adaptability, and discretion. His life shows that influence in Tudor England often required a combination of expertise, reputation, and strategic positioning rather than inherited power. Dee's enduring significance stems from the dual nature of his work. Empirical observation and mystical speculation coexisted, reflecting a transitional intellectual landscape in which science, magic, and politics were intertwined. His instruments, manuscripts, and records of angelic communication functioned as practical tools and symbols of authority, showing that mastery of knowledge could confer influence beyond formal office. Dee trained and corresponded with scholars, navigators, and state actors, shaping English exploration, cartography, and early scientific thought. His contributions to navigational instruments and mathematical techniques extended England's reach overseas and demonstrate the long-term impact of specialized knowledge. Even when layered with mystical interpretation, his intellectual work influenced both practical policy and symbolic authority. Dee's mystical practices were not mere superstition. They reflected an attempt to systematize hidden knowledge and integrate it with empirical observation, forming a coherent worldview that addressed questions of power, legitimacy, and destiny. By blending the spiritual, personal, and political, Dee exemplifies how Tudor intellectual life connected knowledge to broader societal and state concerns. His career highlights the multiple forms of power in Tudor England. Visible authority, like that of monarchs or ministers, coexisted with influence derived from expertise, reputation, and the ability to interpret and manipulate systems of knowledge. Dee's life shows that agency was relational, symbolic, practical, and intellectual, often operating across these spheres simultaneously. Dee's extensive correspondence and participation in European intellectual networks extended his influence beyond the court, connecting England to continental debates in mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy. His ability to operate across intellectual, mystical, and political domains reflects the strategies necessary for survival and relevance in a competitive, uncertain environment. The relationship between science and the supernatural in Dee's work illustrates the fluidity of Tudor epistemology. Authority could be built through mastery of both observable and hidden systems, enhancing personal standing and state capacity. Yet this authority was precarious, dependent on court favor, religious acceptance, and the careful management of reputation. Dee's adaptability and strategic positioning allowed him to navigate these challenges successfully. Viewed alongside Mary Bullen, Dee's life demonstrates that enduring influence in Tudor England relied on expertise, discretion, relational skill, and adaptability. Power did not need to be visible to be effective. Knowledge, credibility, and strategic use of information could confer lasting authority. Dee's life highlights the layered and interconnected nature of history. Contributions from individuals working behind the scenes, whether in politics, diplomacy, scholarship, or mystical practice, shaped outcomes in ways that traditional narratives often overlook. Dee's work shows how knowledge and reputation could intersect with strategy to influence events, navigate risk, and leave a lasting impact on society. His life reflects the complex interplay of intellect, power, and survival that define the Tudor world, demonstrating that historical significance often resides in the subtle, multifaceted, and sometimes enigmatic exercise of expertise. Traditional histories often focus on monarchs, wars, and major political events, leaving many influential figures in the shadows. Examining the lives of those who worked in less visible ways reveals the subtle forces that shaped the social, political, and intellectual life of Tudor England. Influence was not always formal or public. It could be relational, intellectual, or symbolic. Figures like these challenge conventional historical narratives, reminding us that significance is measured not only by titles or fame, but by the lasting effects of knowledge, strategy, and action. Mary Bullen's story illustrates the role of women in navigating power within a patriarchal society. Though overshadowed by her sister and Mary's connections and choices had tangible effects on court politics, family fortunes, and social maneuvering. Her ability to manage relationships, assess risk, and maintain agency in a high-stakes environment shows how influence could operate subtly through diplomacy and personal intelligence. Her life encourages us to question how history judges significance and recognize the contributions of those outside official recognition. John Dee offers a complementary perspective, showing the power of knowledge as a tool for influence. Unlike those whose impact came through social networks, Dee's authority rested on mastery of mathematics, navigation, astrology, and the occult. His work informed statecraft, exploration, and scientific inquiry, while also carrying symbolic and mystical significance. Dee demonstrates that intellectual achievement could wield influence in multiple, sometimes paradoxical ways. Understanding figures like him expands our sense of power, showing that ideas and expertise can be as consequential as social maneuvering or formal authority. Reconsidering these histories challenges assumptions about visibility and legacy. The lives of Mary Bullen, John Dee, and other overlooked figures show that the traditional focus on rulers and major events provides only a partial view of the past. Influence often left subtle traces, but these traces reveal complex networks of interaction, negotiation, and innovation. By bringing these stories to light, historians and readers gain a fuller understanding of how power, agency, and knowledge function beyond the obvious corridors of authority. The effects of their actions extended beyond their immediate context. Mary Bullen's skill in navigating courtly structures highlights the enduring value of discretion, strategic positioning, and relational intelligence. Dee's contributions to navigation, mathematics, and intelligence supported England's expansionist ambitions and laid the groundwork for later scientific inquiry. Influence, therefore, is not limited to the moment it is exercised. It can resonate across generations, shaping institutions, traditions, and social norms. Both Bullen and Dee exemplify the interplay between personal ambition and broader historical forces. Mary acted within social constraints, but left lasting marks on her family and court. Dee operated at the intersection of science, statecraft, and mysticism, showing that influence could be complex and multidimensional. Their lives illustrate that historical actors often worked in multiple spheres simultaneously, balancing personal goals with wider social, political, and cultural currents. Recognizing this allows us to appreciate the many ways influence manifests. Reevaluating their legacies also asks us to consider how history is constructed. Mary Bullen was long overshadowed by more prominent royals, and Dee's mystical pursuits often obscured his scientific and political contributions. Recovering their stories requires careful attention to evidence, context, and the biases of previous historians. This approach demonstrates that history is not fixed, but shaped by what we choose to observe, highlight, and interpret. Their experiences also highlight the human side of history. Mary's life shows the personal challenges and risks of courtly life, while Dee's illustrates the tension between curiosity, social expectation, and spiritual belief. Attending to these dimensions enriches our understanding, emphasizing that choices are shaped by emotion, relationships, and moral judgment, not only by politics or power. Both figures demonstrate the importance of adaptability, resilience, and strategic action. Mary survived a competitive court by reading social cues, making calculated decisions, and acting decisively. Dee navigated intellectual, political, and mystical realms with flexibility and foresight. Their lives show that influence often comes from skill and judgment rather than formal power, offering lessons in agency and effectiveness within structured environments. Examining these individuals also sheds light on Tudor culture. Mary's story reflects family, court, and gender dynamics, while Dee's work shows the period's engagement with science, exploration, and the occult. Together, they reveal a society where knowledge, influence, and survival were intertwined, and where actions in less visible positions could have lasting impact. Their stories have relevance today. They show how knowledge, strategy, and adaptability shape outcomes, offering insight into social, professional, and political life. Influence is relational and cumulative, and understanding its subtleties can inform decision-making in both personal and collective contexts. Recovering these narratives also challenges established hierarchies. By examining those who were overlooked, we confront assumptions about authority and contribution. Mary Bullen and John Dee show how careful study of marginal figures can illuminate broader patterns, enrich understanding, and encourage nuanced interpretation. Their lives highlight the interaction of personal agency and structural forces. Both worked within constraints but still shaped outcomes and left enduring legacies. This shows that history emerges from the interplay of context, opportunity, and action rather than being entirely predetermined or individual. These stories also raise moral and ethical questions. Decisions had consequences beyond the individual, affecting families, communities, and institutions. Recognizing this adds depth to historical understanding and connects it to contemporary reflection on responsibility and judgment. Recovering the narratives of overlooked figures democratizes history, valuing diverse experiences and forms of influence. Their actions formed networks that extended well beyond their lifetimes, showing history as interconnected rather than a series of isolated events. The lives of Mary Bullen, John Dee, and others remind us that significance is multidimensional. Influence can be subtle, relational, and enduring, and understanding history requires attention to context, continuity, and the interplay of personal and structural forces. Their stories encourage a more inclusive, nuanced view of the past, showing that even those outside the spotlight can leave a lasting impact.